Okay, so you want to own a private jet charter company. Rich clients calling you up, sending their own plane to pick them up, landing on a private strip while everyone else waits in a security line. That's the picture. Here's what the picture doesn't show you. The plane sitting empty in a hangar for 11 days straight while it burns through insurance, crew salaries, and maintenance reserves, whether it flies or not. A private jet charter company isn't really an aviation business. It's a business where a $9 million asset either earns money in the air or loses money on the ground, and there is no third option. Some charter companies genuinely print money. Some quietly bleed their owners dry, while the planes look busy on the schedule. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly which one you're building. Before we talk about a single dollar, we need to talk about what kind of business this actually is, because private jet company is really three different businesses wearing the same wings. The first is fractional ownership, the model NetJets invented back in 1964, where a client buys a small percentage of a specific aircraft, gets a set number of flight hours a year, and pays a monthly management fee on top. The second is the membership or jet card model, where a client pays a large annual commitment fee, sometimes starting around $170,000, for guaranteed access to an entire fleet at a fixed hourly rate. The third is pure on-demand charter. No membership, no ownership stake. A client just calls, books a flight, and pays for that specific trip. This is the version most people picture, and it's also the version with the thinnest margins. Here's the part that trips up almost every new owner. The plane, not the office, not the marketing, is the expense that decides whether this business survives. A mid-sized private jet costs somewhere between $8 and $12 million to buy outright, and that's before it's earned you a single dollar in charter revenue. But the purchase price is only the entry fee. Annual ownership costs, insurance, hangar space, crew salaries, and maintenance reserves run another $1.2 to $1.8 million a year. Every single year, whether the plane flies once or 300 times. Now here's the decision that quietly determines everything else. Do you buy a newer aircraft or an older one? A newer plane costs more upfront, but in this industry, clients are currently paying 15 to 25% more per flight hour for an aircraft built within the last 5 years. An older plane is cheaper to buy, but it earns less per hour and needs more maintenance, which eats the savings you thought you were getting. Cheap isn't actually cheap here either way. Alright, so you've bought the plane. Now let's talk about how it actually makes money, because charter pricing is more layered than most people assume. The first layer is the flight hour rate. A mid-sized jet charters for roughly $4,000 to $6,000 an hour, billed to the client. That sounds like serious money, but here's the number that actually matters. The variable cost of operating that same hour, fuel, crew, landing fees, maintenance reserves, runs about $4,500, which leaves a gross margin of only around $1,000 per flight hour. And that's before the fixed ownership costs even enter the picture. So here's the thought experiment that explains this entire business. Picture two identical $9 million jets side by side in the same hangar. One flies 200 hours a year, the other flies 600 hours a year. Which one is the better investment? Obviously the one that flies more. But here's what most new owners miss. Charter revenue on the hours it does sell typically covers only 40 to 70% of variable cost, and it rarely covers fixed cost at all unless the aircraft crosses roughly 500 flight hours a year. Below that number, the airplane is a beautifully maintained hole in your bank account. Above it, every additional charter hour starts contributing real profit because the fixed costs are already covered. Let's actually do the math, because this is where the business either works or quietly doesn't. If annual fixed ownership costs run $1.5 million, and each flight hour contributes about $1,000 in gross margin after variable costs, then the aircraft needs to fly roughly 1,500 hours a year just to break even on fixed costs alone. 1,500 hours is over 4 hours of flying every single day, all year, with no maintenance downtime. In reality, most private aircraft fly nowhere close to that, which tells you something uncomfortable about how many charter jets sitting on tarmacs right now are quietly underwater. There's a regulatory layer here too that catches a lot of new owners off guard. You cannot legally sell charter flights to the public with just any pilot and any plane. In the United States, an operator needs what's called a Part 135 certificate from the Federal Aviation Administration, which comes with its own maintenance standards, pilot training requirements, and operational oversight. Skip this step, and you're not running a charter company. You're running a very expensive personal favor. So how do the biggest players in this industry actually manage the math? Mostly by changing what they're selling. NetJets doesn't sell single flights. It sells fractional ownership shares, which means clients pre-commit capital and hours in advance, smoothing out the utilization problem. VistaJet and Wheels Up sell membership access instead of ownership, collecting a large annual fee upfront regardless of how much a member actually flies, which is the exact same idea a gym uses with its membership base. The company that carries the utilization risk is different depending on the model. In pure on-demand charter, the operator carries all of it. In membership models, the client is effectively prepaying for capacity whether they use it or not, which pushes some of that same underwater risk onto them instead. So, does owning a private jet charter company actually work as a business? The honest answer depends entirely on utilization. In the optimistic scenario, your aircraft consistently flies above that 500-hour threshold. You've built a client base that books repeatedly rather than once, and you're running a membership or fractional structure that locks in revenue before the plane ever leaves the ground. Industry data suggests charter companies overall can post 10 to 50% profit margins on around $12 million in typical annual revenue. That's a real business. In the realistic scenario, utilization sits well below that break-even line. Maintenance costs run higher than expected because private jets get pushed harder than a personal aircraft ever would. A slow season arrives, and suddenly a plane that looked like a $9 million asset on paper is a $9 million liability sitting in a hangar. The difference between these two outcomes isn't the plane. It's whether that plane is in the air enough to matter.
So if you're picturing rich clients calling you up and a plane waiting on the tarmac, remember what's actually determining whether you make money. It was never really about how luxurious the plane is. It's about how many hours a year you can keep it flying before the ground finally catches up with you.